African Literature Explained for Beginners. Welcome to Prose and Perspective 1000, where African stories are explained with clarity, depth, and purpose. If you've ever asked questions like, what is African literature? Why is it important? Or why do schools study African novels so much? Then this video is for you. Today, I'll explain to you African literature for beginners using simple language, clear examples, and ideas you can easily understand, whether you're a student, a teacher, or just curious about African stories. What is African literature? African literature refers to stories, poems, and plays written by Africans or about African experiences. These works reflect African history, culture, beliefs, struggles, and hopes, told mostly from an African point of view. Before modern African literature, Africans told stories orally through folk tales, myths, songs, proverbs, and legends. These stories were passed from one generation to another and were used to teach morals, history, and community values. When African writers began to write novels, especially during and after colonial rule, they started putting these experiences into written form, often using the English language so the world could hear the African story. Why African literature is important? African literature is important for several reasons. First, it corrects false stories. For a long time, Africa was written about only by outsiders. African writers like Chinua Achebe, Buchi Emecheta, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie gave Africans the power to tell their own stories. Second, African literature helps us understand culture, marriage, family, leadership, religion, tradition, and social values. Third, it teaches life lessons. African novels do not only entertain, they educate. They warn, advise, and challenge readers to think deeply about life, power, justice, and humanity. Common themes in African literature. Although African writers come from different countries, many African novels share common themes. One major theme is tradition versus change. Many stories show how African societies struggled when colonialism and modern life disrupted traditional ways. Another important theme is family and community. African literature often shows that life is not lived alone. Individual actions affect the whole community. We also see colonialism and its effects, loss of culture, conflict of identity, and resistance. There is also gender and power. Writers like Buchi Emecheta focus on women's experiences, sacrifice, and struggle in patriarchal societies. Finally, African literature explores identity, the question of who we are, where we belong, and what we value. Common characters and style. African novels often feature strong but flawed characters, people who struggle with pride, fear, duty, love, or tradition. The language may include proverbs, local expressions, storytelling rhythms, and cultural symbols. This makes African literature rich and unique. Many African stories move slowly and thoughtfully, allowing readers to reflect, not just rush through events. Why beginners sometimes struggle with African literature. Beginners sometimes struggle with African literature because of cultural references they don't understand, traditional practices that feel unfamiliar, slow storytelling compared to modern movies. But once you understand the context, African literature becomes deeply rewarding, emotional, wise, and powerful. How African literature helps the modern world. In today's world, African literature teaches us tolerance in a divided society, respect for culture without rejecting progress, the danger of pride and silence, the value of empathy and community.
These lessons are not old, they are urgently needed today. If you're new to African literature, start small, read one novel, understand one culture, and grow from there. If this explanation helped you, like the video, subscribe to Prose and Perspective, and share it with someone who wants to understand African stories better. And as always, read boldly, think deeply, Afri Heart leading the way.